Welcome to In a Heartbeat, coming to you from the studio of WMTV Channel 5 in Grosse Pointe Farms at the Grosse Pointe War Memorial. We are broadcast also throughout southeastern Michigan on AT&T UVerse on Channel 99. I'm Dr. David Bali, and I'm your host for In a Heartbeat. You may remember that recently a team of physicians from Henry Ford Hospital performed Michigan's first intestine transplant. One of the transplant team members and directors is my special guest today, and he's also the director of transplant surgery at Henry Ford Hospital. And his name is Dr. Marwan Abouljoud. Dr. Abouljoud, welcome to In a Heartbeat.
Thank you, David. Thank you for the opportunity to come and be your guest.
Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule, doing your heroic things to be a part of this, and I think it's great, the information that you'll share with our viewers today. Dr. Abouljoud, maybe you could start out by telling our viewers a little bit about your practice and the types of things that you do.
Yeah, my personal practice is focused on liver transplantation with a special interest in living donor liver transplants. And I also perform advanced hepatic surgery and surgery of the bile ducts for cancer and complicated injuries and things of that nature. My transplant training background is that of liver, kidney, and pancreas transplantation, but as many of us do, we subspecialize subsequently into an area.
And your transplant system and team at Henry Ford Hospital is quite extensive, and it's known for some things in particular, isn't it?
Yes. The first thing that we're known for is that we're the most comprehensive transplant center in the state of Michigan and in the region, because we do offer heart, lung, liver, kidney, pancreas, and small bowel transplants, as well as stem cell transplants. So that makes it fairly comprehensive in that scope. And in terms of special and unique things, one of the challenges has always been that many people in Michigan left the state to seek care for advanced transplant procedures and unique transplant procedures. And our focus has always been to bring those innovations, bring those transplants to Michigan, make them available, and also make them top-notch, whether it's outcomes or framework or setup, so that they're easy for people to get to and benefit from having the best care close to home.
Having a multidisciplinary transplant program can be important, because you were telling me one time that when you have an organ transplant, your risk of needing another one is increased.
Yeah, the teamwork and the team concept really is at the essence of transplantation. Many specialties, you would have a patient visit with a physician and their care episode is complete. In transplantation, it does not work that way. Physicians, surgeons from different specialties, nurses with different backgrounds, all team together to center around one patient. And so if a liver transplant is needed, as an example, you will need to have the gastroenterologist, hepatologist, surgeon, radiologist, infectious disease, nephrologist for the kidney problems, and pharmacists and nurses, and nutrition, you name it. And this is very unique to transplantation and some areas of medicine, but mostly in transplant. And that's one of the most important contributions we've made at Ford, is to put these teams together and construct them around a product or a service that centers around the patient, so there's not no complexities created for the patient as they navigate the issues that they deal with.
Dr. Abouljoud, one of our viewers perhaps may be wondering, how does a patient get to see you, and where do your patients come from?
You know, our patients come throughout the state of Michigan and some from outside the state. This is a state and regional service that we provide. You will not find 20 liver transplant programs in one state. It's just not economically and technically feasible. So the patients come throughout the state, and towards that we have satellite clinics that service some patients in their local areas, such as Kalamazoo, Flint, Pontiac, and things like that. The patient profiles that we get and the way the referrals happen, the far majority go through referring physicians.
I would think so.
We are fourth-tier referrals. There is a primary care, then there is a specialist, then a subspecialist, and then there is a transplant. And then we are quite often the subspecialist and the transplant, so we become third-tier, fourth-tier referrals. On occasions, patients self-refer, whether by word of mouth or going through our website at henryford.com/transplant, and they find a whole slew of information that's helpful for them to navigate, number one, the world of transplant, and two, to connect with our transplant team, my staff, or myself.
Dr. Abouljoud, what are the different types of organ donation? There are deceased donors, there are living donors, and maybe you could explain the different types.
Yeah, that's a good question. When we're thinking of organ transplant, transplant surgeons are really the in-betweens. There is the patient who needs an organ, and then the surgeon who can do the operation. But an organ has to come from somewhere. This is not like taking an appendix out or a gallbladder out. Mm-hmm. So somebody has to donate that organ. We are all very familiar with the concept of living donation. People donate a kidney, they have two of them, and Henry Ford pioneered in Michigan the living donor liver transplants, and a person can donate part of their liver to a loved one as well.
That's a good point. I think some people may not actually, I think many people are aware of donating their kidney, but many people may not be aware that they can donate a part of their liver, you know, and they don't really need that, and it will help to regenerate. Maybe you can tell a little bit about that.
Yeah, when you donate a liver, the difference between liver and kidney is just the level of complexity perhaps is a little bit higher, and there are fewer programs offering that, but certainly it is an operation we do routinely. And the liver is unique in the sense that the remaining portion that you leave behind regenerates to full size, usually within the 3-month time frame.
That's pretty amazing.
It is a very unique thing. It allows us to do a lot of things for people with liver disease and liver problems. And then the other type of donation is the deceased donor. We've had brain death law in the United States for a long time. And when people unfortunately get into an event where they either get a head injury or they bleed in their head from an aneurysm, some people do reach the end point where their brain is dead and no longer functioning. And usually the body within hours will collapse. And those who are brain dead in that situation and prior to the collapse of their body systems can donate their organs. And certainly nobody wants to make that decision when they have those kind of injuries. And that's why we always say, put your name on the registry for organ donation, either through the Secretary of State when you get your driver's license, or going on the Gift of Life Michigan website in Michigan and sign up for that. This way the decision is not made during critical times by other people besides yourself. Now, there is a third type of donation which people do not understand or are not aware of. It's called donation after cardiac death. When people have a brain injury or a brain event where they're not entirely legally brain dead by exam, but we know that there is damage that's so severe that the family wants to pull the ventilator off and let them die, during that critical moment, the question gets asked, would you consider when you pull the ventilator off that you would want to donate the organs if and when the heart stops? And if the answer is yes, that becomes donation after cardiac death. And people think that this is a new thing or an innovation, but in reality, before we enacted brain death laws, this is how all deceased donation took place.
Really?
People went off the ventilator because they were withdrawing from support, and then when their heart stopped, they took the organs if the consent was obtained. And obviously with brain death, it allowed us to maybe do it under less critical scenarios where when the heart stops, you have to rush. And certainly it adds a lot of other complexities to that.
Dr. Abouljoud, what are the most common types of transplantations of organs that you are most intimately involved in?
In my division, we're heavily involved with liver transplant, kidney transplant, pancreas transplant, and more recently, small bowel or intestine transplant. The intestine embodies intestine alone or intestine with other organs, intestine, liver, intestine, pancreas with stomach, and these are what we call multivisceral, multiple abdominal organs, or modified multivisceral. which was the one we reported last year as being the first in Michigan.
While we're talking about that, I think that's fascinating. Tell us about that first intestine transplant.
Yeah.
What was going on with the patient?
It is very interesting. It is very interesting. I think the people who came in to watch to learn about the first experience were quite surprised that during the operation where the tummy or the abdomen was empty when we removed the old organs and now was filled up back again with new organs. In this particular situation, it was a very nice individual who suffered from Crohn's disease.
Mm-hmm.
And they were taking some pieces of his intestines before, and the remaining pieces were no longer working. And that person could not even eat solid foods. He aspired to eating a hamburger. And the things we take for granted,
Yes.
tasting or eating, for him was a luxury. And so he was on nutritional support through the IV. And he became diabetic as well. So in this particular situation, then we move into what you call modified multivisceral. Instead of putting all the organs in, liver, pancreas, intestine, etc., we just put the intestine, pancreas, and part of the stomach because the stomach was not functioning very well.
Mm-hmm.
So we gave him stomach, pancreas, duodenum, and intestine, and that restored intestinal function, restored better stomach function, and then made him non-diabetic.
That's miraculous.
It is miraculous. It's actually amazing that we're able to transmit life from one person to the other in that manner. We always thought that we can treat people for a disease, but we never thought we can take life from one person whose life ended and put it into another person and extend their life that way.
And that person, in a way, their life continues on in a wonderful function as well.
It does, and they become champions of organ donation, champions of transplantation. And in the midst of this, I think also the transplant staff who are involved with the experience are inspired by the whole experience and develop a different vocation and an interest in transplant because of its nature.
While we're talking about that, why don't you go through for us some of the statistics of organ donation? I think people would be very interested in that.
Yeah, the organ donation is not maximized in Michigan or United States, but in general, people try to think of how many people donate per million population. And the statistics in the best countries, and some of them are European, are in the neighborhood of 45 donors per million. In the United States, we range between the 20 and up to 30 donors per million. So there is a lot of opportunity for donation in that. And certainly, public education is key, and dismissing some of the myths and concerns that people have about organ donation. There are some taboos and myths that are not well-founded that people have to be aware of, and also promoting it in a way that has made it easier for people. And more recently, the recently elected Secretary of State has enacted the new law where by the staff at the Secretary of State offices will be asking individuals who are interested in organ donation so that they can go on the state registry. And when you go on the state registry, the nice thing about it is that your family will not be asked if something happens. It will be there in the data bank, and then you would have explored that option on your own. And there were a lot of studies done in many different states that this one single step is the most important thing in increasing organ donation rates in the state you live in.